came across a text message exchange that I had with a friend of mine from way back in December, and he wrote, "Wow, 2020 is going to be a great year." And I thought, my goodness, if he ever makes any other prediction that things are going to be good, hide under the bed. What a year, huh? Here we are, June the 15th, between racial tension and police reform and another shooting, this time in Atlanta, Friday night, coronavirus concerns. And of course, with coronavirus, you never really fully know whether the media is rooting for the worst possible scenario or if there's a real fear about spikes and about the reemergence or cases going up. There's such a disconnect between people with different ideologies, and we should have prepared ourselves when we saw the way people politicized hydroxychloroquine as a treatment for coronavirus, and Trump touted it and people lost their minds over it. I guess we shouldn't be surprised that the mainstream media does not say a word when thousands and thousands and thousands of people gather in Brooklyn, New York for a rally, which was the case over the weekend. And yet the media will lose its mind when President Trump holds a rally this coming weekend in Tulsa. It'll be two different rallies. The rally in Brooklyn, with arguably more people standing shoulder to shoulder, many without masks, that's not anything to worry about, according to the mainstream media. But a political rally that already has had, I'm told, over 800,000 ticket requests. And believe me, there is not a venue in Tulsa that can hold 800,000 people. There's going to be a lot of people in Tulsa. Watch the media meltdown for that, and then get out a microscope and look for the media objections to the rally in Brooklyn, New York over the weekend. It's incredible. The dishonesty of the media is pretty profound. And in fact, Chris Wallace called out the media over the weekend. Chris Wallace is, a straight newsman. A lot of people believe he's anti-Trump. A lot of people, don't like the fact that he's associated with the Fox News channel. They're suspicious of him. So people have a mixed view of Chris. Chris was railing over the media in an appearance over the weekend with Howard Kurtz on Fox News. And there was a clip from Newsbusters that showed some pretty profound things, but I do believe that Chris accurately depicts the state of today's American news media 2020. Here's what he said.
Is journalism becoming more intolerant? I mean, 10 or 20 years ago, we have seen the publisher of the New York Times completely flipping and criticizing a conservative op-ed that he had defended because a bunch of newsroom staffers didn't like it.
It feels like the inmates are running the asylum. I've been critical sometimes of the Times, and I think that their liberal tendency tends to bleed out under their news coverage. Some people have accused Fox of the same thing in terms of our tendencies. But I thought that what happened in the last week over at the Times was just extraordinary. So Tom Cotton writes this article about sending the army, sending the military to quell the protests at the height of all of the violence. And it's in the op-ed page, where you get columns and various views of various political stripes. And there was a tremendous blowback from inside the Times, and so much so that the publisher, as you say, Mr. Sulzberger, decided that he had to defend it. And then there was so much more blowback that he caved. Right. He then said it was bad. The paper said it was bad. They apologized for it. And the op-ed editor, a pretty distinguished journalist named James Bennett, I'm not quite sure whether he quit or was fired. It was a profile in a lack of courage. You see some reporters now who have become advocates. I see it in the press briefings now. I was pretty tough in the press briefings with Ronald Reagan and his press secretaries in the 80s, but we were basically trying to get information. Some of the press briefings now, I see the White House press corps, supposed to be one of the top jobs in journalism. It's more playing gotcha or more just trying to get in arguments and advance their point of view. That's not what we're supposed to be doing, and that's what I see too often among my colleagues in the media. I'm not holding myself up as something grand, but I think too many reporters have fallen into the role of being advocates and frankly, with this president, anti-Trump advocates. And, we got to be neutral.
So there's a take from a veteran newsman about the state of the news media today. Over at the Federalist, Tristan Justice wrote a column called "Welcome to Your New World Order," a rundown of woke insanity. Tristan writes, America's in the midst of a new cultural civil war that for years has been brewing under the surface, as left-wing academics breed aggressively woke children now permeating throughout the nation's mainstream institutions. Battle lines are clearly being drawn, and this column at the Federalist goes through a list of some of the woke insanity that is taking place in America today. It is quite a list, and we're going to run it down for you here in just a moment.
Breaking now on the Mike Gallagher Show.
Big ruling out of the U.S. Supreme Court. The court ruled that LGBT workers cannot be fired simply for being gay or transgender. Now, about half the country has protected workers against discrimination based on sexual orientation or gender identity, but there was no federal law that explicitly prohibits LGBT workers from being fired on that basis. Well, the Supreme Court has ruled in favor of the LGBT workers who brought the case, a lawsuit. There was a gay man who was fired from his job as a child welfare services coordinator after joining a recreational gay softball league. A skydiving instructor who was fired from his job after revealing his sexual orientation to a female client, and a transgender funeral director who was fired after announcing her intentions to present as a woman. Wow, the Supreme Court ruling that LGBT employees do have legal protections. Now, what's going to be fascinating about the media's reaction to this, the decision in 2020, a pretty historic decision, sort of in the lines of the legalization of same-sex marriage. Wonder if the media will acknowledge this is Trump's court, because this is a decision by the U.S. Supreme Court, well into the first term of Trump's presidency. I wonder if the media will connect those dots. But again, a big decision from the Supreme Court ruling that workers cannot be fired for their sexual orientation.